I call to order the April 26th meeting of Waynesboro City Council. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. It's great to be back live again and see the citizens up close and personal. So thank you all for coming out tonight. If you would like to speak at one or more of our public hearings or citizen comment period this evening, please sign up in the lobby on the appropriate sheet that you want to speak at, and we'll call you up at the appropriate time. We also continue to provide remote access to viewers. If you're a remote viewer and you wish to speak at a public hearing or citizen comment period, please listen to the following instructions. Mr. Ham.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, our call-in number is 844-844-9200. And then when prompted, callers should enter the access code for the meeting, which is 398145#, 398145#. You will hear a message that states the Q&A session has started. At that point, the caller should press *6. This is a key part here. You will hear then a message. If you would like to speak, please press 1 to be added to the queue. And it's important that if you wish to speak that you do that. At that point, you'll be added to the queue, and you'll hear the audio feed of the meeting. And at the point when it's appropriate for you to offer your comments, you'll be prompted to do so by the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Is there a flag right here? Yes. Let's stand and say the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. And for my fellow council members, the guy up in the booth there, he's got our mics kind of turned down so we don't get feedback. If we're going through the process and you want to speak, just raise your hand so he knows what you might be turning up, okay? All right, with that brings us to item number 2. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as presented? So moved. Thank you, Dr. Hostner. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion on the meeting agenda? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Meeting agenda carries 5-0. Thank you all very much. Item number 3 is to consider adopting the consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look over the consent agenda? Do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Aye. Aye. Sorry. Any opposed? Motion carries 5. Thank you all very much. The next item up is item number 4, and it's a matter for the mayor. I don't have any real good news to pass on tonight. I've been out of the area for the last week, and I don't have good information. So I'm going to pass on my part. Was there an announcement? That'll bring us to item number 5, which is matters from council members. Are there any council members that wish to share anything?
Yes, Mayor Henderson. I would like to offer my condolences to the Seaton family for their tragic loss. Dr. Seaton serves on the Augusta County Board of Supervisors, and I'd like them to know that my thoughts and prayers are with them during this difficult time.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Dr. Hoster.
Also, I was planning on saying something about Seatons and how much we feel for them at this time. But also want to update folks on the COVID situation in Waynesboro. Our numbers continue to be low. The 7-day daily average was 2 cases in the past week, so that's great. We're continuing to be vigilant. The second thing that I want to share and be both hopeful but also remind people about is vaccination is now available for all citizens over the age of 16. You have to be careful, or you have to be thoughtful about which vaccine you sign up for if you're between 16 and 18, but everyone can sign up. A lot of doctors' offices have it. The Augusta Health facility has available appointments. You just get on the Augusta Health website. A lot of pharmacies are getting it. You just sign up at their facilities. We are at about 43% of our population in Waynesboro has had at least one vaccine, which is great. That's right around where the state average is. Some areas are a little bit ahead of us. So we need to keep working. We need to keep getting the word out. The vaccines are available. It's very easy to sign up for it. I encourage you all to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Hostler. Very good.
Yeah, I also just wanted to express my condolences to the Seaton family. I had the great fortune when we first moved to Waynesboro 16 years ago. Ann was one of the first people that I met. Was a friend of my great uncle. I think it's always a different experience when the person who our community loses. I've got a personal connection, and particularly when she was a hugger, it wasn't a time where she didn't hug. So I will miss her, and deepest condolences to Scott and family.
Anyone else? All right, so item number 6 is our first public hearing, and item number 6 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance to rezone 115 Ivy Street, tax map number 35-4126A-4, from HB Highway Business to LB Local Business. Mr. Juday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can you turn on Mr. Juday's mic?
You good now?
Can you hear him out there?
Working out.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one rezoning, a public hearing for that rezoning before us today. The location is 1115 Ivy Street. It's the Waynesboro Chiropractic and Acupuncture and Massage Clinic. It's located right next to the Exxon on that street. You can see it's right up here between Oakland Parkway and where Ivy is popular. The applicant is the chiropractor's office there. They're requesting a rezoning from HB Highway Business to LB Local Business. The applicant wishes to convert the unit to a live-work unit. The building currently contains a full bathroom and a kitchen. At some point in the past, it did have an apartment. This will require quite a bit of building work and the resolution of some existing fire code violations. So this rezoning will not resolve those items. The applicant is aware of that. The rezoning will simply make it legally possible for her to clear those items up and move forward with that work. Here's a map of the property. This square right here is the subject parcel. There's a vacant lot located just to the north. Davenport Valley Installations just to the west. Shield Cell Storage and 7-Eleven south, and then single-family homes across the street. This sort of dark magenta color here is HB zoning. As you can see, there's a large HB zone that runs up North Poplar Avenue all the way up Ivy Street. Almost nothing in that area is conforming at the moment. It's a zone that was put in place back in the 50s or 60s when that was expected to be a larger commercial corridor, but instead things tended to migrate out towards West Main Street. So instead, the applicant's requesting a rezoning to LB. As you can see, the nearest LB parcel is located up here at the intersection of Edward and Ivy Street. Normally, there would be some concern with this parcel that it would be spot zoning, which is when you only zone one parcel in an area to a new zone. However, in this case, we're zoning it to what the comprehensive plan calls for and away from a nonconformity. Therefore, it's not an instance of spot zoning. We're not vulnerable to a challenge on those grounds. In this case, the property fronts on a 2-lane minor arterial. Almost all of our HB zone. The HB zone is designed for larger, more intense retail uses and other commercial uses that are meant to be auto-oriented and perhaps draw regional sales. So, for instance, the town center, all of West Main Street, those areas are zoned HB. LB is designed to be for lower intensity commercial uses that perhaps serve immediate neighbors or may have housing next to them, things like that. In this case, it fronts on a 2-lane street. Almost all of our other major HB zones front on major 4-lane roads. It borders a large single-family home zone just across the street. Generally, we want HB zoning to be away from houses. And it's a small parcel. It really can't easily be used for heavier commercial uses. So for those reasons, we don't think that any of the uses in the HB zone that are being lost here are particularly appropriate for the site anyway. It is technically a down zoning in this case, so it's going from a higher intensity use down to a lower intensity use. But what's being gained is the ability to also have residential uses on the property, which HB zoning, we don't allow residential uses because those are usually high value parcels. We want them to be high tax paying, sales tax generating uses. And again, the comprehensive plan is designated for office use, which is in other locations supposed to be in line with the RO zone, the LB zone, which is being requested in this case, the MXB zones. It's not supposed to be HB. And it's surrounded by areas that are designated for residential largely. So we think this rezoning is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and we'll move it towards conformance away from non-conformance. The Planning Commission recommends approval on a 7-0 vote. No one has signed up to speak at this public hearing, but the applicant is here in case you have specific questions from the applicant. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about the rezoning. Thank you.
Do we have questions for Mr. Judah? Great presentation, Luke. Still have to open the public hearing. I hereby open the public hearing on the matter of rezoning 115 Ivy Street, tax map number 35-4126A-4 from HB highway business to LB local business. Is there anyone online? I close the public hearing on this matter with no one signed up to speak. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance for 115 Ivy Street?
So moved.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Hostetler. This matter will carry over to our May 10th regular business meeting where it will be considered for approval. Item number seven is to receive the final presentation of the city manager's recommended fiscal year 2022 budget. Mr. Ham?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Mr. G. Day is going to switch us out here. I realize that this information will be familiar to the council. We've been progressing through a budget process now with a number of work sessions and opportunities for the staff and the council to communicate about the budget. And as we spend some time this evening soliciting comment from the public, I thought it would be important and appropriate to at least furnish some review and insight into the highlights about the budget on which we're seeking public comment. Mr. Juday. Oh, that's probably what's going on. Thank you. So the recommended general fund budget for the fiscal year 2022 balances at about $54.5 million. If you compare that to the current fiscal year, that's a 7.6 increase, which is for folks who follow municipal budgets or have served on the council for some time, is a little bit higher than what you're accustomed to seeing in a year-over-year increase. That's attributable entirely to the extreme and emergency measures that were taken last year this time to balance the current budget in the face of uncertain public health and economic conditions. If you compare the general fund to the budget that we had planned to present, it actually is about a 2.7% increase to what would have been proposed at FY21. And that's more on the order of what you would typically see in Waynesboro, a year-over-year increase. I would note also that in a moment we'll talk a little bit about key features and expenditures and what the budget accomplishes. A big portion of those accomplishments or key features include unwinding or repairing and restoring some of the measures that were taken and recommended and adopted by the council, again, to contend with the unknown economic conditions that would be associated with the pandemic. You can see here just a reminder of general fund sources of revenue. About 80% of the revenue that supports services in the general fund is generated locally, which is why decisions and forecasts about revenues are so important for not just the short-term success of a budget, but the long-term sustainability for our organization and the community generally. State aid accounts for about 16% of revenues in the general fund. And then the remaining revenues are derived from federal revenues, which typically are less than 3%, and other local revenues, which largely made up of transfers from the enterprises back to the general fund for services rendered, such as supervision, accounts payable, other administrative functions, insurance, etc. In our last work session, we reviewed this slide, which I think is helpful to understand at a 40,000 foot level what's going on with the FY22 budget and why I've emphasized in my presentations the importance of the local revenue and why I've recommended a 90-cent tax rate for the basis of the budget. We actually do realize some net new revenue. That's the top third of the page. If you look through the sources, the general property tax increases by $2.7 million. Most of that is attributable to the biennial general reassessment. We enjoy some growth in other local taxes of $2.4 million. The $400,000 increase in state revenue is simply the restoration of cuts that were made, largely at the recommendation of municipal associations and analysis provided by associations, but it simply furnished cities and counties forecasts that certainly state revenue would be impacted by the pandemic and that you should adjust your budgets. We adjusted ours by $400,000, and that indicates simply that we're restoring that state aid. And then finally, you see the parentheses around $1.7 million. That reflects the fact that the current budget is based with a plug from fund balance in the amount of $1.7 million, and we'll have to make that up in the ensuing fiscal year. So you end up with a net new revenue position of approximately $3.8 million, which is substantial. If you then consider, however, the uses, the bottom two-thirds of the page, you have a significant, the largest new use or increasing uses, about $500,000 is attributable to the fact that the city level funded the schools last year, and we actually are making good on the commitment from the funding formula from the previous year. The next line down refers to the restoration of paving. We did not conduct street paving, don't plan to conduct street paving in the current fiscal year. And that basically allowed the organization to take advantage of some additional VDOT maintenance funds overhead. And that really supported supplemented revenues in the general fund. We had to forego the benefit of paving our streets, increasing maintenance for our streets, but enjoyed the one-time financial benefit of balancing during a tough time. That is one of the items that we would point to and say, you certainly do not want to do that on a recurring basis. You can't do that on a recurring basis, and you really don't want to even approach that on a recurring basis. It's commonly recognized that we should be applying as much maintenance revenue as we can to milling and paving, otherwise maintaining the road infrastructure in our community. The next line down is a $500,000 increase reference to public safety compensation increases, positions, and materials. You'll recall that during the fiscal year, we provided increases to patrol officers in order to improve retention and improve our competitive position in the labor market. Additionally, in the police department, the chief has held vacant a number of positions as a cost-saving measure. We've included funding for those positions in the next fiscal year so they were restored. And we cut substantially some materials and other operating supplies, not only in the police department, but the fire department. And again, we feel like it's important, or I feel like it's important, to do some repair to the budget in that regard. Next line down is about a $400,000. It's not about, it is a $400,000 increase attributable to a 3% increase in salaries and wages that is scheduled to be implemented on July 1st. employee compensation has been a priority for our council and our organization for a number of consecutive years. You're aware that we several years ago conducted a pay and classification study and have attempted to make that implementation of that study a priority, but have not been successful in that. The pandemic and economic conditions last year made it difficult to do that. It's not impossible. And I don't see the 3%, actually I would tell you, ought to be regarded more as a maintenance item. It doesn't really move us forward or improve our competitive position in the labor market. We expect health insurance premium cost to increase by $200,000. Next line down is a $130,000 value for furloughs that have been included as an expense measure in last year's budget. $60,000 in other insurance increases. You're likely aware that our operational increase to the Middle River Regional Jail, or excuse me, our operational obligation or contribution to the jail goes up by $110,000. And then we've attempted to improve our contribution to the capital improvement plan for the council, also a stated goal and priority for the council in recent years. So those new expenditure items where repairs account for about $3.7 million against the $3.8 million in no new net new revenue. And really it's an explanation, I think, of dual benefit. First, it illustrates how quickly revenue can be consumed. And then secondly, how even in the face of a relatively healthy increase, we don't seem to make the progress that we think we ought to make on certain priorities and objectives for the community. Another theme or characteristic of the budget that we've discussed is the fact that the local elected body actually doesn't get to exercise full discretion over the general fund budget itself. That about 42% of the general fund is what we would regard as exclusively local program services and opportunities for council to exercise discretion and authority. 31% is, glasses are failing me both on my slide and on the screen, but 31% I think is local school funding. And so those are really, and even in that case, our relationship with the schools and our funding for the schools is governed by a funding agreement. And so the remaining balance of the uses of revenue in the general fund are debted to maintaining the city's debt, making contributions to state offices, such as constitutional offices, and then our obligation to contribute and help support the operation of regional agencies, such as the Health Department, Valley Community Services Board, Juvenile Detention Home, and agencies like that are oftentimes not clearly or conspicuously regarded as local services, but obviously provide services that are valuable for our community and rely on significant financial support from the city. So I think it's important to note that. Within our local, that area of 42% of local authority, about $16.1 million is salaries and benefits, and about $6.3 million is in non-personnel expenses such as utilities, postage, insurance, software maintenance, basic materials and supplies, other services that we purchase as an organization. That's 16.1% in salaries and benefits, $16.1 million in salaries and benefits is about 70% of that 41% total local budget. I think it's important to note for the council and the public as well, positions that are included or recommended in the budget. We have a permit technician in the building and zoning office that we're experiencing the good fortune of active growth. And in addition to that, property maintenance has been a priority that the city has responded to. And so the end, we have one permit technician, and we feel like in order to enhance service to the public and also give her, or that individual, some appropriate capacity, I'm recommending the addition of additional permit technician. You see 2 utility 1 positions. Those are in the Public Works Division, and the expense of those 2 positions is largely offset by a reduction in the relationship that we have with the jail to purchase work crews, or not purchase work crews, but pay for the expense associated with work crews. Jail is no longer providing that as an option right now. Additionally, there are some part-time positions included, senior systems analyst in the information technology department, the CIT coordinator. I would note that position is in place, and it's a cooperative position among Stanton, Augusta County, and Waynesboro. And I would say crisis intervention services are conspicuous in the public eye presently, and Waynesboro, specifically in the region generally, have been pioneers in that regard, have been furnishing that training, and those departments have been applying those skills largely ahead, in my opinion, of the curve that you see nationally. And so I think that's important to continue support of that training and that service level provided by the department. An part-time ADA coordinator, and then finally an office manager in the emergency operations center. That was a position that was cut back in the recession times, the Great Recession. It began in 2009. It has never been restored, and in the last year, with Mr. Kreitzer juggling so many priorities and operating the department, interfacing with external agencies such as the health department and the hospital, I think it's been apparent that we can make more productive and efficient and effective use of Mr. Kreiser's time by furnishing him some support for administrative responsibility. I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it's important manually to refresh the council's cognizance of this and inform the public that there are a significant number of positions that are requested each year by the departments that are not funded upon my recommendation. And I think increasingly it's apparent the value that these positions would bring to the community. Waynesboro is now perhaps the only municipality in the valley that doesn't enjoy the benefit of a public information officer. I think that when you can detect, at least I can detect, an appreciable difference in the quality and frequency and regularity of the communication from the local government, from those organizations that have that position and can dedicate resource to that function, as opposed to those who do not. Election services actually is a service area among municipalities where access is increasing and levels of service are increasing, and our general registrar has recommended on several occasions ideas that she has about restructuring her staff to better fulfill new obligations handed down from Richmond. You can see there additional police officers, firefighters, horticulture, recreation, maintenance, and communications and economic development. So I would generally regard in a complementary manner the requests made by our departments. When I go through that list and contemplate the benefits that I think the community or the organization would derive from those positions, I think they're legitimate and bona fide requests, but we have to make difficult decisions, and it's my responsibility to make difficult recommendations. And these positions don't typically make it through. They make it through this year, and that's a repeat experience for a number of those positions on our list. Just some quick remarks about enterprise funds. These are your water, sewer, refuse, and stormwater. There are no proposed increase in water rates this year. There's a 3% proposed increase in the sewer fund. That's part two of scheduled consecutive 1.5% increases. We didn't do the increase last year in light of the uncertain economic times and stress that families were feeling, or we anticipated at the time families would be feeling. And I'm recommending this year that a 3% increase to account for the scheduled increase this year and this increase last year. The base fee for the stormwater utility fee increases from $396 to $456. And then finally, in the refuse fund, I'm recommending a $1.50 increase per month. Those additional funds will be used to prepare a new cell at the landfill. Presently, the folks at the landfill and the landfill board have done over time a great job of smoothing expenses and planning for expenses, trying to avoid requiring cash infusions from member jurisdictions. Our position at the landfill has been extremely healthy, but anticipating the expense of closing the cell and opening a new cell, we find that we need a cash infusion in that regard. And I would note that even with the $1.50 increase, our monthly fee is among the lowest in the area, if not the lowest. Recognizing that all of these recommendations have impacts on our customers and our families, calculation on the sewer is about a $3.44 increase per bill on a typical, what we would regard as a typical family consuming about $10,000 in a bi-monthly period. That converts to $20.64 for the year. So tonight, the council will hold 3 public hearings, one on the tax rate, one on the rates and the enterprise fund, and then one on the budget as a whole. And then we would be scheduled to adopt those ordinances on May 10th. If there are any questions, I'm happy to respond at this time. And this presentation will constitute sort of the manager's remarks for each of the 3 installed public hearings.
Any questions for Mr. Knapp? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item number 8, which is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance imposing taxes for calendar year 2021 for the city government, for maintenance of public schools, and for other expenditures necessary to provide for assessment of persons and property, for the collection of taxes, revenue, assessments, and imposing penalties for the failure to comply with the provisions thereof. Are there any questions for Mr. Ham on this? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. Before I open the public hearing, Mr. Shaw is going to be the keeper of the time over there tonight, and we ask that you keep your comments to about 4 minutes. At about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, he will give you a signal that it's time to start winding down. So if you would, we've got a number of people in here tonight to try to keep your comments at 4 minutes. We also want to be respectful of our neighbors, so when you come up here, direct your comments to the council members that you want us to know, want us to hear. And at the end of folks that are making comments, we ask that you don't applaud or boo or anything like that. So with that, I open up the public hearing for the city manager's budget.
Give me 1 second, Mr. Mayor, to make sure. So I think number 8 is the tax rate. So the first public hearing is the tax rate, according to my maybe.
Taxes for calendar 2021.
Thank you. Mr. Dwight Williams.
Before I start, if I may, if I can take a moment of silence for my friend Nancy, I would appreciate that. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Dwight Williams. I live at 2818 Jefferson Lane. I'm a homeowner here in Waynesboro. I emphasize homeowner because I am definitely in support of a tax neutral position for the 2022 calendar year budget. And I say homeowner because all of us homeowners here in Waynesboro are about to see a significant increase in our taxes. Now, I don't know about you, but and when COVID hit, I took a 20% pay cut from my employer. And I'm about to see my taxes go up on my house 12%. It's a lot of money. That's money that my kids could be using for one of their activities, or money I can give to my church to support my church activities. But I'm looking at now giving this money to the city, money that I don't want to part with. You know, last time we were here 2 weeks ago, someone in the audience called all of us that we were one and done and would never see us again. But every single person that was here that I know of, all my friends who oppose the tax increase are here tonight. We're going to come each night to oppose this. This is not right. In the middle of a pandemic where we're trying to recover our economy, we're about to have our taxes increased. That's not how we do this. This is the wrong time to be increasing taxes. If this were the Trump economy, which we recently had, where our 401ks were climbing, people were making money, folks had jobs and weren't losing jobs, weren't losing bonuses, weren't losing pay raises, we're going to oppose the tax increase, like myself. Most of us are homeowners here in Waynesboro. And you're hearing from some on the other side who are going to be for the tax increase. And my challenge is how many of them are actually homeowners? How many of them actually are going to feel the effects of the tax increase? And so I'm not going to take up much more time, but I want to leave with this. Please take this into consideration. The burden we're putting on the taxpayers here in Waynesboro. On a time when we're trying to rebuild our economy, taxing is not the way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Mr. Craig Scott.
Good evening, honored mayor and honored council folks of our wonderful city. Craig Scott, I live at 1616 Armistead Road in wonderful Waynesboro. I'm going to take a little bit different tack on the pro and con. Now, I'm against the tax increase, but for different reasons. I'm going to turn liabilities into assets. The council's already started to do some of those real reforms. Trash collection, something mundane that we all need. It's partially privatized. I recommend that we fully take advantage of it. We know in the real world, the private sector, albeit not perfect, is optimal or better at delivering goods and services wherever they are. Let me give you some other examples. Our water treatment plant, our sewage plant. That liability can be turned to an asset to save tens of millions of dollars in debt for our wonderful Waynesboro. How? If there are companies that will manage them and turn it into our own private utility. I've done research on this. There's a company called Essential Utilities at Sterling Record. They manage scores and scores of small communities in Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, etc., and have a sterling track record. It would save tens of millions of dollars and actually pay down debt. We could actually sell it and then have them manage it, and we could oversee any idiosyncrasies. And would lower the rate and save tens of millions of dollars. This could be applied to any other goods and services. We had a lady here last time, I remember, maybe her snow wasn't cleared on 3rd Street. She had a local neighbor clear it. We could implement further in a penumbra or word privatization. So we can actually have better services at lower costs, and it's a win-win situation, ladies and gentlemen. I see little downside. We do diligence, we check on that, white papers are available, etc. So we can actually have the best managed city, par excellence to all of you in our Commonwealth. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Herman Wells.
My name is Herman Wells. I live on Magnolia Avenue in Waynesboro. I want to speak this evening with regard to a possible increase in property tax in the city of Waynesboro. As I have followed many of the gaps in money normally provided through the tax base, including schools, have been filled by funding received COVID relief money from our federal government and additional money if they lost their job. Regardless of the help as a group we all received, it is a very tough year for all. Increasing the property tax rate this year will not help families in this town enjoy a better quality of life. With regard to our home values, it is good they have risen. Nationwide, home values rose the most last year than they have in the last 4 years. According to Realtor.com, in December 2020, the median listing price for a single-family home skyrocketed 13.4% from the same time the previous year. Why are our home values increasing? Because families are moving from the larger cities to purchase homes they can afford? Is it that remote work has surged since the pandemic began? Maybe it's because there's a shortage of housing or perhaps record low interest rates. Mark my words, it is a remarkable event not likely to be repeated in coming years. Now the city has reassessed local home values and they were found to increase sharply. So sharp that the city will need to reduce property tax in order to attain tax neutrality. Perhaps now is the time to seize the moment and dramatically increase taxes. I say no. From my experience, what goes up must come down. Eventually, the market will soften, interest rates will go back up, additional housing units will be built, the glut will set in, houses will sit on the market longer and sell for less, and values will flatten and then decrease. What will happen to our local budget then? I believe we will then have a lack of funding for all the initiatives we fund with this year's tax rates. As housing values return to normal, the city will have to once again raise taxes. Consider this, there needs to be a balance between the services our city provides and the amount of money it takes in from taxpayers. But how much is enough? If we need to increase funding to pay for cost of living adjustments or perhaps even a rainy day fund, that could be supported. Increasing taxes to support new or additional initiatives is not an area I support. We must resist the temptation to increase taxes. I heard an individual a few weeks ago state that most of the people in this forum can afford to pay the cost of an increased tax rate. I do not believe that is true. I propose that people who can afford to increase, who can afford an increase in taxes are probably not even here tonight. I mean, if you can afford it, why should you fight against it? But the biggest reason to keep property taxes low is that you allow families on the lower end of the income scale to purchase homes in our city. According to the Harris Public Policy Center of the University of Chicago, high property taxes fall unfairly on our country's poorest homeowners, many of whom are minority residents. These individuals have to save for a down payment, pay additional insurance funds for an FHA loan, and deal with overall higher interest rates. Adding to the burden of owning a home by increasing property tax rates might push some homeowners to cut in areas that could affect their family's quality of life. And we are not only talking about homeowners and those wishing to be homeowners. Tax increases affect renters when their rent is raised by the owner of the property to pay for the increase. So when we raise taxes, we actually hurt those who need the money the most. Please do not increase our property taxes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wills.
Ms. Tiffany Sensabaugh.
City Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Tiffany Sensabaugh, Woodrow Avenue. It's definitely out of my comfort zone to get up and express my opinions. I don't normally do this, but I think this is important. I did listen to the budget work session, and after everything that was presented and discussed, I support a tax rate reduction to 83 cents to equalize our property taxes, our real estate taxes. A couple things that stood out to me during the presentation was that Waynesboro is projected to receive about $4.5 million in funding from the American Rescue Plan. And I do understand that we don't know how we're going to be required to spend those funds, but we can expect to receive something very soon. I also remember it was said that we will do better than we did last year in terms of the city's revenue. So I am hearing that we do have money coming in from the rescue plan and in regular revenue. But also in that same meeting, I'm hearing that you want us to give you more as well. And so I hope you can kind of understand how that sounds from our perspective. I know the city has financial obligations that we have to take care of, but I also heard a lot of wants in the presentation. And in my opinion, now is not a time to move forward with those wants. Many are trying to recover from up here. Gas prices are going up, the cost of food is going up, the price of everything is going up. And you want us to pay more in taxes also. I just don't think it's the year for that. I didn't get a raise this year, as most people didn't. Many even took a pay cut. And so we have to learn to live within our means. And it should be no different for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sensabaugh.
Mr. Jamie Fiscal.
Good afternoon, City Council. I didn't come quite as well prepared. I'm James Fiscal, 1401 Red Road Avenue. I didn't come quite as well prepared as some. There are some numbers that stick in my head. With what we're going through, what everybody's gone through the last year, the price of lumber right now, I believe this might be a federal thing, but everybody's having a hard time right now. Things are costing more everywhere you go. Our economy is slow. And right now, with everybody having to pay more, federal taxes, probably state taxes, and our dollar deflating as fast as it can. The price of everything's going up, gas, groceries, and now we're asked to pay more even from our city. It's a big strain. It's a lot to ask. I am for not raising the tax, dropping it back down to 83%. And like I said, I am too well prepared, but I feel like my voice should be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Sensabaugh.
Mr. John Woodworth.
Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you for taking the time to hear some of our sentiments from the public. As has been expressed in the time since the pandemic, but public sector, small businesses, people that work on commission, sales, they've not had their incomes frozen or no increases. They've often, and small businesses especially, are trying to make do with much less revenues. And so I oppose the tax increase. As a homeowner, I live on 649 Chestnut Avenue. Many households, especially in lower socioeconomic levels, are going to be really pinched by making this increase. So I would support a tax neutral position on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I didn't catch your last name, but thank you for your comments.
Sure. John Woodworth.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Danny Ledford.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I just want to read this. I did this quickly so I would not miss anything. Inherently, government, regardless of the level, city, state, national, seems to be unable to refrain from assuming that increasing taxes will fix all the ills that befall them. Without any understanding of how it truly impacts the citizens, it reduces the purchasing power, causing people to minimize their support of local businesses, which hurts the taxes that the city gets. While the citizens suffer, the government gets fat. Well, it's time to trim the fat. We all need to tighten our belts, but the city also has to. The city seems to be more concerned about sending out flyers regarding the street art throughout our community, as opposed to fixing the intersection on 13th or getting more job creating businesses to move into Waynesboro. If ballooning the budget with the expectation of a new tax windfall is reckless and ignores the impact on its citizens, I am asking that you tighten your belts as opposed to asking us to tighten ours. With this pandemic and what's impacted our jobs and what we're bringing in, we've tightened our belts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ledford.
Mr. Kurt Lilly.
Good evening, I'm Kurt Lilly. I live at 218 Skyland Avenue.
there are some, and they spoke last time, that are asking you to raise their taxes. They obviously have money to spare. However, most of us out here do not. 2020 was a hard year on us. We didn't get raises, and we were laid off, but they had their hours cut. So we cut our spending. We changed our lifestyles. We got second jobs when they were available. We went on a budget, and we figured out how to get by on the income that we had. We expect the same from our city council and our city manager. I'm sorry the income was cut. Welcome to the club. We expect you to figure out how to cut spending, to tighten your budget, and figure out how to get by on what you have to work with. Regarding this $4.5 million, if the money comes after you raise our taxes, are you going to lower the taxes again, or are you going to spend that money? You're going to give it to us as a rebate? What's going to happen? Please do not let our taxes go up due to this reassessment. If you vote for the increase, we will run a candidate against you. We will knock on doors, we will educate voters, we will turn them out, and they will vote you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Mr. Jim Wood.
Good evening, Council. Most of you already know who I am. I'm Jim Wood. I am a resident here of Waynesboro, my chosen home. A lot of you know my story from our little run last year, just for short. But I want to remind somebody of something as far as from my personal story goes. I come from a small town in southwest Virginia originally, where I grew up. Till I was 10 years old, I lived in a town called Clinchcote, Virginia. I know probably nobody's ever heard of it, because it's a mining camp. It's one of the poorest areas of this entire country, a place where they still send missionaries because of their economic status. When I was young, my dad got his back broken in the mines and was out of work for over a year. And it was hard to survive without family and charity of friends until he healed enough to go back to work. In that area, they tell people that that during the Depression, nobody realized there was a depression because everybody was still equally as poor and had nothing. That brings me forward to now, what we're going through in the pandemic. And I'm going to keep my words short. All right? But right now, we're dealing with certain folks of an economic status who are feeling those same pains right now. You know, when I was young and went through that in my life, that was a lesson that I swore I would never go through again. I worked hard in my life to where now I don't have to worry about where my next meal will come from. I don't have to worry if the gas is going to be cut off. I don't have to worry if I'm going to have water the next morning when I get up, because I couldn't pay the bill. And I really don't have to worry at this particular time in life if I'm going to be able to feed my son or my wife. And I think we're all lucky here, you know, that we do not have to face those troubles. But there's people right here in our community who are facing those very decisions right now. Homeowners, property owners in this city who are facing those decisions. Do I pay my gas bill, or do I have enough food for my child tonight to eat before he goes to bed? We talked about it early on when the pandemic first started, and a program was put forth to make sure that schools provided lunches and provided meals for the kids, even though they were out of school, because of the problem of not being able, in some households, to feed those children. The thought right now of raising this tax rate, or keeping this tax rate at 90%, and not even really entertaining the idea of going back to the 83 cents, is as hypocritical and shameful as I've seen it. There are people in our community who are hurting. My wife lost her job during the first part of the pandemic, but we were lucky she found another one. Was it a strain in that period of time? Absolutely it was. But I still find myself blessed that we were able to push through without having to worry about the lights being on. People in our town right now have that worry every day. And increasing or keeping that right here, or even the discussion of exploring the fact of increasing it even higher, is shameful. Downright shameful. I hope you consider, if not going back to the 83-cent rate, at least look at common ground between the 83 and 90-cent rate. Find where we can cut the fat, find the stuff that's not necessary right now in this period of our history, and make those cuts in order to help those people in our community make Waynesboro as best as it can possibly be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. No callers?
No one else signed up, sir.
Thank you all for your comment. I'm going to close this public hearing, and I'm going to ask, is there a motion to introduce an ordinance establishing calendar year 2021 real estate tax rate?
Mayor Henderson, I'd like to offer an amendment to the ordinance. I make a motion to amend the ordinance establishing taxes for the calendar year 2021 from 90 cents per hundred to the equalized rate of 83 cents per hundred.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Is there a second to the motion to make an amendment to the tax rate from 90 cents to 100 to 83 cents per 100?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer up an amendment as well. Actually, not an amendment, but to proceed with the city manager's recommended budget at 90.
I think we've gotten advice from council prior to this meeting that we've got to deal with this amendment in 2 weeks before we can take on another amendment. Is that correct?
Yes. There's a motion and a second on the floor that has to be resolved. You can't have another motion that deals with the same subject matter until the first matter is resolved.
Yeah, we've not done that in the past, so that's thank you.
All right, we've got a first and second from Ms. Williams and Mr. Allen. This ordinance will be introduced and considered at the May 10th regular business meeting. Brings us to item number 9. Item number 9 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance amending section 30-58H3A, 30-58H3B, 66-3C, and 86-139A of the Code of the City of Waynesboro to increase sewer utility charges and rates of revenue rate transfer and stormwater equivalent resident unit housing. Mr. Happy, have anything on that?
I don't have any introductory comments.
That was presented.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing to this matter. Public hearing is now open.
John Woodworth.
My name again is John Woodworth at 649 Chestnut Avenue. I hadn't intended to speak on this matter, but I was reflecting as I was looking at the sheet on my own experiences with water and sewer, and I was wondering, for me personally, in my household, it does seem like it's the most that I've ever paid for in any other community I've lived in. I've lived in 7 other municipalities. I'm wondering if the council receives any sort of benchmarking, and I'm ignorant to what might be available out there, but any sort of comparison across other communities.
We had an update on this during the budget work, during the work sessions that we have, and we're somewhat in the middle.
And do you all have an ongoing tick list of?
Can you and I talk about this at work? We're not supposed to be answering questions during public comment. This is a chance for you to tell us, but you and I can meet over coffee if you like.
Okay. I guess what I would hope as a citizen that there would be that kind of information, and I'll definitely avail myself of it since it was discussed at the last day. Maybe have it be presented on the website. I didn't do a lot of digging. But the other thing is some sort of tick list of some top 10 best practices as it relates to cost control, cost containment, things that have been proven in other municipalities for reducing costs of these services. So it's almost like a public service that we have to take, it's a tax increase. So I didn't know if anything like that was also available, just an ongoing best practices and maybe some progress towards that. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, sir.
No one else, sir.
Anybody on the phone? I hereby close this public hearing. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance increasing sewer fees, refuge collection, and stormwater fees as recommended by the city manager?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hostetler. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there any discussion on this matter? Okay. This ordinance will be received for final consideration at our May 10th meeting. That brings us to item number 7. Item number 10. Item number 10 is to hold a public hearing considering introducing an ordinance regarding the recommended operating budget for fiscal year 2022. Mr. Hampton, you've already presented on that.
Yes, sir.
So I hereby open the public hearing regarding the city manager's operating budget.
Ms. Erica Smith.
My name is Erica Smith. I live at 1109 Jefferson Avenue here in Waynesboro, and I do own that home. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and city staff. I'm the board being member of the Waynesboro School Board. My purpose for speaking this evening is to address the city manager's fiscal year 2022 budget, more specifically, the real estate property tax, which is critical to fund it fully. When the school board and school staff worked for months crafting a budget to operate our public schools, that city council would adopt a budget based on an 9% real estate tax rate. This was not an unreasonable expectation, since the majority of Waynesboro citizens mentioned that school funding and public safety as being the most important to them. In fact, I have heard each of you say how important supporting our public schools is to you. Most of you have had your own children graduate or attend our schools. I'm here to tell you tonight how devastating it would be to our kids in Waynesboro if the city manager's proposed budget is not fully funded. Since 80% of the school's annual budget goes to pay for salaries and benefits, this past pandemic year, our teachers, classroom aides, principals, bus drivers, secretaries, school nutrition workers, custodians have been champions to our kids. They have worked selflessly to get students to learn, whether at home or in the schools. They have fed them, clothed them, treated their injuries and sicknesses, while at times possibly risking their own health. Now we see the impact of the pandemic academic year, with several of our staff announcing retirements or resignations. We are expected to fill those vacancies with the new educators that are highly educated and highly qualified. During state and national teacher shortage, we also have to retain current educators that are highly qualified. That would be extremely difficult to do if we don't have the support from City Council to keep our salaries competitive. In this time of shortage of educators, and every school system in the area is seeking out the best talent for their students, you have to help us do that. Do not lower the tax rate. A small number of citizens have come before you to say that we are all struggling to recover from the pandemic. However, of the 39 cities in Virginia, only 15 have a lower or equal unemployment rate than the city of Waynesboro, according to the Virginia Employment Commission. In fact, Waynesboro's 5.6 unemployment rate as of February 2021, is lower than the national average of 6%. It appears that times are getting better. You, as a city, will likely find yourselves in the same predicament as the school system, with $2.7 million lost revenue from a lower tax rate to 83 cents. Experienced police officers and other public safety employees will likely retire or go to other localities for better compensation. Don't let that happen. In closing, the citizens of Waynesboro need City Council's leadership during this time. Although we have suffered as most Americans have, we need to look to the future. So again, I am not asking you to lower the tax rate. Let's keep Waynesboro moving forward. Waynesboro's future is the thousands of students that will walk through the doors of this school expecting a great education. Thank you for your time and service to our city.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I hereby close this public meeting. Is there a motion on the floor to introduce recommended fiscal year 2022 operating budget?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Because of the introduction of tax rate ordinance at 83 cents and the budget appropriation ordinance is before you, is going to have to be amended. And so what we would do would be to reduce the general fund budget appropriation ordinance by the $1.2 million or so that is attributable to the reassessment rate. And then we also would have to either reduce expenditures likewise or to otherwise increase revenues through use of fund balance or some other measure. Probably the thing to do, and I'm looking towards Ms. Michelson, is whether you do that on the fly or simply don't introduce an ordinance this evening, have an ordinance prepared for the next meeting. As I say, the dilemma is that you've got a tax rate ordinance proposal that won't fund the budget proposal, so we have to amend that. Of course, just as a matter of process, so we're all aware, what will happen at your next meeting is that there would be a vote on the tax rate.
Correct.
If 3 members of council vote for 83 cents, then again, you have to amend your budget accordingly. If it fails, then another amendment proposal for tax rate could be presented, and we would have to adjust the
Item until our next meeting. Should we set it, we need to set this aside until our next meeting, being the tax rate is lower, that doesn't go in accordance with this.
Well, there's a couple of issues at hand. One, if the budget is amended more than 1%, we need to hold new public hearing and have new ordinances to reflect the amendment down, if it's down. Second of all, I guess the staff needs to review which expenditures will be amended to see, or transfers can be made to see if there's actually going to be 1%. My conversations with Mr. McCormick, it doesn't seem to be 100% clear as to whether that's going to be necessary. So our best recommendation at this time is perhaps to make a motion. I mean, all we can do is the best we can at this point, make a motion to introduce this, the manager proposed fiscal year budget, understanding that there's going to be amendments or changes to that budget to reflect what's corollary of the 83 cent tax rate. And that those may have significant impact either from the legal requirements. We may have to, in essence, start over at the May 10th meeting, introduce a new budget at that time and have it pass at the May 25th meeting. But depending on what staff and I discussed, we may be able to pass something at 5:10, depending.
All right, so let me rephrase this. Is there a motion to introduce the city manager's recommended fiscal 2022 operating budget with the stipulation that we need the new numbers? That
Mr. Mayor, I would, if I could just point of order, regarding the tax rate by Lisa Seifeld at a recent work session, the sort of draconian cuts to our school system, compensation, adjustments and otherwise that
would be substantial, and I felt uncomfortable that our community would not have the opportunity to engage in a very deliberate conversation and that brand new public hearing, should we entertain, council entertain an 83% tax rate, because that's certainly not being spoken to. So I think it would be very interesting if that were to be developed. It just sort of goes back to my original question about a secondary introduction of another rate. Because if we had the other rate, then we could make a motion and a second to advance the budget before us. But in the absence of that motion, the question lingers at 83. So that's why this point of order.
And I understand the point, but the process doesn't call for having two separate motions at the same time.
We've not advertised a rate nor a city budget at 83 cents. So the Senate endorse, our community has not seen what an 83 cent tax rate, our school system has not seen, our employees have not seen the implications to an 83 cent tax rate.
Mr. Mayor, I think in our budget work sessions that we had, we talked about an 83-cent tax rate. And we were given by Mr. Ham what would be short if it was not left in 90 cents. And the amounts was told to us. But we also talked about if we reduced it to 83 cents and we have more income than what we had projected for this year's budget, that would take care of some of those shortfalls. We also talked about whether or not we would be able to use the American Funds Act money and whether or not that would replace it. I'm going forward with an 83-cent tax rate, but I'm not looking to do any cuts. I'm not looking to cut the compensation to the employees. I'm not looking to cut the compensation or funding to the schools that we talked about. I'm not looking for any cuts. I mean, one of the other alternatives we have money to make everything that he put in his budget full. Now, I know we've been schooled and taught since I've been on city council that we do not go into our reserve funds for reoccurring debts. But as I've heard from many people in this community, this is not a time for a tax increase. And I still believe wholeheartedly that we can equalize at 83 cents. We can still fund everything that Mr. Ham had in his budget. Some of it through growth, some of it through extra money that we're going to have revenue that we're like counting on. And some of it will be some of the money that we will give the federal government. It's the taxpayers' money. I mean, these are things that we need for our community. That money, we can spend that. And so, when we talk about we haven't had any conversation or anything about it, we have that conversation about an 83% tax.
I guess my point is that have we advertised and published the city manager's budget at 83 cents that the general public has had an opportunity to review? Has that been published on our website? No.
Well, we advertise 90 cents. If you go lower, there's no need to re-advertise.
But that's not my question. My question is, has the public seen what an 83-cent tax rate would do in terms of service reductions, cuts in services to compensation for teachers, or otherwise? The community has not been afforded an advertised rate at 83 cents.
I can't speak to whether, I'm sorry, I can't speak to that.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward to me. We have the attendance we have this evening because we've advertised a 90-cent tax rate with the city manager's recommended elements. And so, in the absence of an alternative concept that has been produced, publicized, made available for any member of the public to download or get a copy of, I don't see how we can proceed. Simple.
I think that the way this system works, he gives us a recommendation, but it's up to the council to vote what the tax rate is and and how much of his recommendation we want to follow. That's not something that's determined by the people. That's what we vote on. We should be voting on it, listening to the people and listening to the businesses in this town. And when you sit up here and say, we're going to be making cuts and we're going to do this, and I'm not proposing any cuts. I'm not proposing cutting schools, and I'm not proposing cutting the benefit increase to the area.
What you want to dip into our savings, which is what our community has a proud history of doing. We go into our savings, so then when we actually need to do something, we don't have any money to do it with. I mean, we've been down that road before. We've done that for 20 years. So again, my point is that we have not advertised an 83-cent budget. We have not communicated the implications to that budget. I think that the education we've heard from a school board member this afternoon, I would think our education community would be very interested to see the implications of an 83-cent budget.
And
We've not given that opportunity.
we also didn't advertise a $4-point-some billion windfall, that I'll call it, coming to the city, or how many billions windfall coming to the schools. That wasn't talked about in our budget or anything, so that's going to come down the road.
Well, it's also theoretical.
Okay, all right, right now we've got, the floor is open for a motion to introduce a revised budget. They're going to make a motion to do that.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
But, I've got a question about what budget are we talking about?
The
We have any details.
recommended fiscal year 2020 operating budget, I make a motion.
But what is the budget? We have a budget in front of us that does not jive with an 83% tax rate. So how are we revising it on the fly here to make that happen?
It can happen with the growth that we have, the extra money we have from this year's revenue, and with the money that we're going to get from the federal government.
So you said a revised budget. What are you revising? Are you saying this budget in front of us?
Yes.
Okay, so this budget in front of us that is built on a 90% tax rate, which is not the tax rate to support.